Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us and attending tonight's Zoom discussion. As part of our Community Expo virtual sessions this year, it's a little bit different than usual. We'll be hearing from our community partners about tonight's topic, emergency preparedness, and why it's so important. Our speakers will be reviewing tips, tools, real-life examples, and stories to ensure your family is prepared for any emergency. All right, so we can first, let us welcome all of our partners volunteering their time. We have David Deary from USAA. Say hello to David. And Denise Zuniga from Fleet and Family Support Center. All right, so we'll be starting in just a minute. We will be monitoring all questions through the chat. So at any time during the session, please send any question you have along with the vendor that question is for through the chat, and we'll be sure to get it answered at the end of the discussion session. And then just a reminder that we'll wrap up tonight with some great door prizes. Okay, so let's get started. To introduce David Deary with USAA.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here tonight. I'm glad that I'm able to come and speak a little bit about emergency preparedness to y'all. Did you want me to just answer the question, or did you want me to ask the question? Cherise.
Just go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll answer all questions at the end.
Well, I really don't have a presentation. We were just going to, I was just going to answer the questions. It's kind of like what we did the other night.
Okay.
So yeah, I got any kind of presentation. So at the end, Mike's going to throw up a slide that'll give you some reference material to help you after we talk about the stuff. I just encourage you to pull out your cell phone and then take a picture of it so you don't have to write stuff down.
Let me get those questions ready. Cindy.
Denise, did you have anything you wanted to say just to kind of kick things off?
Oh, I'm glad to be here to be a part of tonight. It's really awesome to try something new. So I miss seeing everybody in person. I got to tell you that, though. And thanks for having me.
So first one we can kick off with is simple one. Why should I plan ahead for an emergency?
Yeah, so I'll start off with it, and then Denise, you chime in, and then you start the next one. You know, if you didn't plan for it, you got to plan for an emergency because it's called an emergency, right? And so you just never know when it's going to happen, and so you got to think about it, and you got to think about some of the different things that you may encounter, and we'll talk about in more details some of those things. But living in San Diego, we're used to emergencies like fires or earthquakes, but and this is emergency preparedness, but you can even look at the start of COVID and the kind of emergency with some people who lost jobs and things. So that gets into budgeting a little bit, but emergency planning is safety as well as financing and budgeting. And so you just got to think holistically of stuff that you might have if something bad takes place. And that's just kind of a precursor of what we'll be talking about for the next few minutes.
Thanks, David. So behind me, you'll see my virtual picture there. The question was asked in the beginning, what would you choose? Well, I would have chosen a battery, but definitely I saw in the notes that somebody put 3 days worth of water. So you can see in the background that I have at least a 5-gallon jug. I do live alone, so I would have enough for 5 days for me to get through because it's a gallon a day. But like David was saying, yes, there are all kinds of emergencies. One, our biggest right now is fire season. And hopefully none of you have been affected by that. But in 2007 and 2003, there were, excuse me, so many fires that literally homes from Ramona had to be evacuated. In 2010, there were 6,554 fires. That is a lot of fires to have to be running from. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So some of the things that we talk about is being able to have an emergency kit. Do you have an emergency kit ready? Whether or not it's one that you buy or one that you put together with your own stuff from your own home. And those can range in price if you're buying them anywhere from $99 to about $400, depending on how big your family is. They have rations in there for food. You know, it's military, so you got to think about MREs and trying to pack it tight. Excuse me. There are also in there, there's ponchos and a first aid kit and a emergency blanket for you to put over you. So those are some of the things that you want to think about. With me, one of the other things that happened not too long ago was in 2011, there was a blackout in San Diego that affected everyone in San Diego County, from the Tijuana border up to Camp Pendleton and all the way down to El Centro. So that took about a little over 24 hours to get everybody back on the grid. So what would you do in a time like that? Do you have enough propane to cook dinner? Do you have enough water set aside? It took 2 hours for people to get home that day. They went to go buy gas and they couldn't access the ATM machines in order to access their money to pay for the gas. So do you have cash on hand? And David will probably touch on that a little bit more as we go through things. But those are some of the things that you want to think about. And with being on the road for 2 hours, do you have an emergency kit in there? You'll see in the background there, I have a bag behind the water bottle, and inside there, it's for my car. It has toilet paper, it has paper towels, it has water, a blanket, it has an emergency kit with flares, and emergency kit to help someone if someone gets hurt. Back over to you, David.
Guys, ready for the next question?
Yeah, go ahead, Trace.
Yep. So is there any special emergency planning I should do in case something happens while a spouse is deployed or underway?
Yeah, everything that Denise just talked about, for starters, is things that you should have in the event a spouse is home or away. The other thing, one thing that we provide is, if you can see this is, because of the virtual. So this is a little portfolio, but if you have something to keep all your important documents, rental agreements, your wills, powers of attorney, all that stuff should be kept safely in one location. So if you have to escape quickly, you don't have to search around for it. Another thing is to save photos, digital photos, have your hard drive back, your computer backed up. So you don't have to worry about taking your whole laptop or computer. You could just grab that hard drive and you have all your photos, that kind of digital stuff. Cash, somebody asked the question, how much cash should you have on hand? And we recommend at least $500 cash, small bills. Assume the worst. Assume that you can't pay electronically. All power is down, but you want to be able to go buy some water. You might need a hotel room, things like that. You might need to get gas. So cash is king. Cash is king always, but in emergency, cash really is king and queen. So you want to keep that on hand. If your spouse is with you, maybe you need a little bit more, but if your family's smaller and the spouse is deployed. And you also want to, one other thing I'll add is a backup. What's your plan? As part of your plan, how are you going to communicate? Are you going to have a rendezvous point? I have older kids that don't live at home, but we all know that if something bad happens in California, we have friends in Arizona, for example, and Utah, and we will know where to contact to see where we're at. So everybody knows where to go. So there's a couple things to know. So when when your spouse is deployed, what to do, what to plan for.
I saw one of the questions was how much per gallon? A gallon a day for each person in your household. So if you have 5 people, that's 25 gallons for 5 days. So that's something that you want to think about. Because where are you going to store it all? I live in a little itty bitty studio, so trying to get that all together is not always easy. What do you do during deployment? First off, for the active duty member, September is usually the time that you go into NFAS and ready yourself for that. Let me get that real quick. Hold on. So with NFAS, there's an actual sheet that you can go on and fill. Well, Because I'm virtual, it's not showing up. There it is. Okay, let me try to switch that screen. Sorry, you guys. And none. Okay, there. So it says, be ready for natural disasters. All right. Are you ready? So you go online to fill that out. It's very important that you do that. Also, you want to put in all the important information that someone will be able to get a hold of you, or vice versa if there is an emergency. Always have a number outside of California for you to locate and talk to someone. And like David said, he said, have a plan. Absolutely, 100% have a plan. How many of you guys out there have family dinners? Okay, with having family dinners, that's a great time to bring up the plan and say, hey, what would you do if this happened? And you can start implementing that maybe after dinner, start writing things down. Think of short places that you would want to congregate. So for example, down the street from me is a school. That's a short distance away from me. So I would want to take and go there and meet up with the people from my family. Okay, you also want to have a place that you're going to go that is farther away. It's always important to have that. Now, if you have kids and they're not with you, how are you going to get to them? And do you have a code word? For example, my kids, it was grape popsicle. They knew that if an adult came to get to them and they didn't know that person very well, the person would need to say grape popsicle in order to go with them. Okay. The other thing that you want to make sure that happens is that you're active duty member and you go and get the powers of attorneys so that you have them if anything was to happen while on deployment. That is imperative that you have that. So make sure that you're up to date with all of that. And then if you didn't know who to call, you would definitely call Fleet and Family, because we do take and get involved with the emergency family accountability centers. In 2007, my coworker at the time, there was big fires in Julian, and she came to Santana High School, and the people who were being evacuated came to Santana High School, and some of them were from Ramona or Lakeside, and so they would congregate at Santana High School. And so she would give information out, and Red Cross would also then come, and a bunch of other entities. USAA would be there, and San Diego Moms to help out with that. Did anybody have any questions? All right, back over to you, David.
Okay, and reminder, we will be asking all the questions in the chat at the end. Next one we have though is, what should a family emergency plan include, or emergency plan and kit include?
So, we've kind of been talking a lot about this. One thing that, so we talked about a rendezvous point. We've talked about a disaster fund, an emergency kit for your car. What might you want to keep in your car just prepared? And just like if you drive up to the mountains, you want to keep some blankets and things in your car if you're going through the winter, because what if your car breaks down? What if you encounter a snowstorm and you can't get through? Well, if you can't keep running your car, you run out of gas. So you'll think about what emergency kit you may want to have in your car. Also a travel bag for each person in the family. One thing about San Diego that, fortunate or not, we have a greater risk of fires than probably earthquakes. But when fires erupt, we kind of get a little bit of warning. I mean, people living in Alpine were probably paying attention to that fire down there that took place a few weeks ago. Where I live up at Temecula, I get fires all around me. So we always have when fires start erupting, every kid who lives at the house gets a backpack, just a couple changes of clothes and stuff, and just ready to go in case we have to beat feet real quick. So that's something. And then I don't remember if it was said, but batteries for your smartphone. It's never a bad idea to have a couple extra batteries charged up for your smartphone. What else can you add, Denise?
Great question. I'm actually gonna flip my camera here to the right way. All right. So you want to have important papers to take with you in emergencies. That's really important. You may need them. Here's the emergency kit that I talked about, which has, the poncho, the emergency rations. They had masks and tissues in there. You want to have different batteries. Also inside that kit, it had a lightsaber, a light stick, survival blanket, and a first aid kit. Now, I know this is a dorky little radio, but let me tell you, it has batteries. I can flip it on and it scans to a radio station. So I have it. It cost me $5. I thought it was a cute little thing to give away. And then I thought, you know what? I don't have one at home. I'm going to keep it for me. So that's what I did. Oh, see, David has his too. Make sure that you have candles and something to light those candles. Earlier, somebody mentioned solar. I think David mentioned solar. I don't have solar, but I bought this little hand crank so I can put my USB on it. When the kids are bored because there's nothing better to do, have them hand crank to get the power. But solar is the way to go. It's much easier. I saw that there was a question on how much meds you should take. 3 to 5 days. If you can grab the whole bottle to take with you, you just might as well do it. I have my water ready, right? I have my first aid kit for my car, as well as having my blanket. And then I would have a backpack that I would grab that would have at least 3 days worth of clothes in it that I could intermix. And you can always put an extra pair of shoes into your car so that you have them if you're running out in an emergency. What's the next question, Cherise?
I have, what are the most common disasters that we have here in San Diego? We know that there's fires and earthquakes. I did see a question in the chat said, other than those, what other disasters may happen in San Diego or California?
Right.
Well, Denise mentioned blackouts. You could lose power, right? And then the other thing that I thought of was, we have had flooding. If you live in Mission Valley, that's built in a riverbed. If you happen to be near the ocean, I'm from Carlsbad, and we had areas of 101 highway, and if you lived up there, those waves would come over during big storms. So, water is a danger, even in San Diego. What else, Denise?
Well, speaking of water, I was thinking of tsunamis, and, even though some people live out in Ramona or Vista, being that close, or even Admiral Hartman, being that close, there's actual signs that say which way to go in case of a tsunami. So that's very, very true. And the one that I was thinking about when it comes to water is the California San Diego River, which is not that far from some of that couple of those Santee properties. And that's been known to flood, besides being down in Mission Valley and it flooding there. So definitely you want to watch out for those.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay. We'll get on the topic of renter's insurance. Why is it needed? And how do you go about setting it up?
Yeah, so, renter's insurance is never a bad idea. And I don't say that because I work from an insurance company. I've had renter's insurance for many, many, many years. Insurance is something in general that you have that you hope you never need, right? But we have it in case we do need it. So, I know that Lincoln Military Housing offers an amount of insurance, but that what they give you doesn't cover your personal effects. And so look at insurance like this. If you have the cash on hand to replace everything that you own, that if you lost it, you don't need insurance, right? Because you can afford to replace it. But if you don't, well, that's where insurance comes in. Is you are purchasing a product that helps you replace things that are lost as a result of something that's oftentimes not your fault, like an earthquake, like a fire, flood, things like that. So it's a peace of mind. So in the event of an emergency, and we see it on the news, a fire rips through a town or a village or a city, what if something happens and you're not even home? So you spent 45 minutes or an hour here learning all this stuff, and a fire erupts when you're on leave somewhere, even not in the state, you can't even escape, and you return to nothing. Well, having renter's insurance, you know that you're going to get your stuff replaced. And that's just, you just know that it's not going to be all my stuff, but I'm going to be able to start afresh. So renter's insurance is important. That's the main reason.
I have to agree with David. I actually had a situation back when I first moved out, and there was a fire behind in the sand pits, because I grew up in San Diego, Santee. So there was a fire in the sand pits, and it was coming towards my house. I did not have renter's insurance. That was the most ugliest feeling ever, going home. And thank goodness the Santee firefighters were awesome. But that's something that you want to think about and not put yourself in that situation. Speaking of putting some of your stuff on digital and things along those lines, any of you guys have old suitcases just lying around? Take and put your valuable stuff that you're not technically looking at right now in those suitcases, because those are easy to grab and go. So your important papers, like, oh, I would love to have them in a file cabinet, but if it's easier to put it in a suitcase so that you can grab it and go, certainly do that. Make your life really, really easy.
Now, let me add one more thing to renter's insurance. If you get valuables stolen out of a car insurance doesn't cover that. Car insurance covers cars that are, accidents. So renter's insurance is what covers belongings. So things that get stolen out of cars, things that go stolen out of lockers. So it's not even just in the event of an emergency and your house goes up in smoke, but if you get robbed, my son has renter's insurance where he lives, where he's in college, and he had $8,000 worth of musical instruments get stolen and got replaced because he had renter's insurance. So it covers all kinds of stuff. I know we're talking emergencies, but just know renter's insurance covers a whole gamut of material. And where to get it at, start with whoever you have auto insurance with, because when you start bundling products, you get a bit of a discount. So that's where you start looking, and then you just balance to see what the cost is and shop around. But wherever you get it, just get it.
Okay. Next one we have is, how much money should families have saved in their emergency fund? If families have not started it, or what are some ways they can get started?
Yeah, so we recommend 3 to 6 months of your basic living expenses should be set aside for an emergency fund. If you haven't started it, start with $1,000. Very few emergencies will cost you more than $1,000. What's a real bummer is if you have 3 months of $1,000 emergencies, one after the other. If you're like, man, I can only afford $100 a month to start socking away, well, start with $100 a month. When you get your tax return next year, well, there's your emergency fund. And one other thing, and I'll turn over to Denise since we're talking emergency funds. For the rest of the year, probably everybody in this room, you're not going to be paying a part of your Social Security taxes. The federal government's not taking that out of your paycheck this year. But that's not free money, because next year they're going to start coming back for it. So it may not be a bad idea to use that, look at your LES, get an idea, or compare last paycheck to the next one, and what extra money's there. Start your emergency fund with that, because you may need that emergency fund come January when the government when your checks start showing up shorter. Well, you saved the money. So, but wouldn't it be great if you save the money and you don't even need it, and now you've built that emergency fund? Denise, go ahead on.
I totally agree with you, David. And besides David and USAA, remember that Fleet and Family does have financial managers. They just want to help you succeed and be, we do have a class called multi-million or $1 million sailors. So that's something that you want to invest in. You want to invest in you and your family, so you have these things later on and you're not stuck going, oh my gosh, I dread going to work every day. Making it even worse knowing that you're sinking lower and lower in debt because of emergencies. That's my best advice ever. It's frustrating.
You guys should, anything financial, start with Fleet and Family. Go to the PFM, work your budget with them. That doesn't get reported to your command. There's no shame involved. They're very good. Yeah.
Okay. What does emergency preparedness look like for families with pets?
So I will say, if you go to the San Diego Humane Society website at sdhumane.org, because I just Googled it when I saw that, they have a whole bunch of stuff about pet disaster preparedness information. So I would start there. Denise, I don't know if Wheaton Family has anything pertaining to that.
We do not, but that is a great place to be able to start. I personally, I know that in emergencies, my animals back in the day would have freaked out and I wouldn't have been able to find them. So I would start with getting a kennel now. If they're not used to being in it, start practicing with them. When you do the family emergency, let's do a fire drill. Go to find them, put them inside the kennel, get them used to it, get them used to them going into the car so that it makes it much easier when there is a real emergency and you've got to get them out. You should have enough medicine if they're taking meds, 3 days to 5 days worth, enough food and water for them as well, along with their halters, their whatever else they are used to helping keeping them calm. Most of the time animals like your scent, so take an old shirt and put it inside of the kennel to make it easier for you. That was a great question.
Yeah, and you know that at past expos, there's a couple of nonprofits in San Diego. Now they deal specifically for dogs on deployment, I think is one of them. But they'd be a good resource to tap into. I mean, that's what's so great about networking, right? Just start somewhere, ask the question. I guarantee they're going to know and will point you into other directions.
Now, I know that some people have pets that are much bigger than kennels. For example, horses, goats, llamas, ostriches, chickens. Get them used to going into the different kennels, or at least have a horse trailer, something along those lines, and practice with them. And then you find out exactly where your nearest location would be to go to get to a safe place for them and for you.
Hi, so I'm going to go ahead and take over. That was kind of just the end of the questions that we had prepared, but we did get a lot of great questions from the Lincoln families. So thank you for everyone who's been submitting questions, and feel free to keep submitting questions as we go throughout the rest of the Zoom session. So the first question was, for families in other states, would flood insurance pay for hurricanes, or do you need separate hurricane insurance?
You need to call your insurance provider and ask that question. But one thing that I learned since I started working here is probably more detail than you needed, but every state has an insurance regulator. And like, if you ever saw the commercial for Liberty Mutual, accident forgiveness, but then this says, with the exception of California and New Hampshire. That's because the California state, the New Hampshire state insurance regulators don't allow it. So it's not that that insurance company doesn't want to provide it. They're not given permission to provide it. So that's true with all kinds of different insurance nuances, hurricane flooding, things like that. So the best thing to do is to call your insurance provider and see what they're allowed to. And then you can call another insurance provider, see if you get the same answer. Because chances are, if not for one, it's going to be no for the others, and it's probably going to be a state-driven thing, not a company-driven thing.
Okay, and so the next question is going to be, are cell phones and landlines equally affected in emergencies?
I'll go ahead and answer that. So in the 2011 power outage, if your cell phone was charged, yes, it did work. It was probably a little bit spotty, but having a landline was a godsend. And my dad used to work for the telephone company, so when cell phones went in, he said, I'm going to keep my landline because it will still work. Unless, for example, somebody hits a telephone pole and knocks down the power and then knocks down the line that way. But majority of the time, a landline is a good thing. That's a great question.
And so our next family question is going to be, what is the best way to plan for an emergency when you have an infant?
When you have a what?
An infant, or like a baby.
Oh. Go ahead, Denise.
You want to make sure that you have enough formula and enough diapers and wipes for the next 3 to 5 days. That can be kind of costly, but it is well worth it. Make sure you have an extra couple of bottles, definitely the clothing, blankets, and the car seat for the car.
And a few extra pacifiers.
Yes. Oh, and their favorite animal. Favorite animal. One of the things I forgot to mention is that in your emergency kit, whether it be at your family, in your home, or in your car, you definitely want to have a picture of your family in there so that you can identify them if you get separated.
Thank you for that. And the next question is going to be, is it really, or is it easier to contact people out of state versus in state during an emergency?
Yeah,
Yeah, varies.
yeah, it really varies. It varies how you're going to try to contact them. You know, different cell phone providers. Cell phone networks work differently. Yeah, gosh, I was just thinking Hurricane Katrina. It was really difficult contacting people out of state. Just depends.
I agree.
Okay, and so I'm not 100% sure on this one, so maybe you all will have more insight. But the question was, is it good enough to have a cell phone picture of a power of attorney during an emergency?
Yes, but I wouldn't rely on having just that because your cell phone could die.
And the next one's going to be, and this is a really good question. So how would you keep important documents, for example, like your birth certificate, your social security card, and things like that? How would you keep that safe during an emergency and accessible?
They also have really cheap accordion files, folders out there, or just a regular binder. Take and put everything in, and maybe you're not very organized at stuff. Like I said, find an old suitcase and put everything in it. You know, if you're not organized.
Yeah, we keep all our stuff in that lockbox right there. That has all the social security cards, all the birth certificates. One of my daughters was born in Japan, so we don't get but the one. And it's in one of those fireproof boxes. So where it goes, we go. And we have a couple of them. Instead of trying to get things bigger and bigger and heavier, we just got a couple of them that we can each grab. And then we also take pictures of them just in case, right? It's always good just to have a backup photo of those documents, and then you save that off your cell phone into the cloud. So.
And so I'm pretty sure this was answered, but just to kind of reiterate, because I did see it again. How many days of medicine should families be keeping on hand?
3 to 5. But if you can grab the whole bottle and make it easier on you, definitely do that.
Thank you for that. And then this is a really good question too, just with everything going on. What are some important considerations that families should be taking right now because of COVID with emergency preparedness?
As a result of COVID?
Yeah, so like what are like COVID specific emergency prep steps that families can be taking?
You know, I can't, honestly, I don't think that there's really any specific emergency preparedness stuff other than the daily preparedness that we're already exhibiting. I would, depending where you live, I would consider more of the social unrest stuff taking place in our country as something to consider preparing for. I don't see anything going on in San Diego or where I live in Riverside, but as far as from a COVID perspective, you know, if you look at it from, if somebody in your family gets sick and has to go to the hospital, they'll probably go in alone. And so preparing that way, but that's also preparing for something that may have a very low likelihood. So when you have kids, you know, you just gotta, sometimes you gotta balance how much you share versus overshare, how much prepare for from an emotional standpoint versus scaring people, if that makes sense.
That is a great point. And also, what if something was to happen to the person staying at home taking care of your kids? Who would be that person? I know that it sounds crazy that if you're not married, you don't necessarily need a family care plan, but we have seen a lot of situations because of COVID that one is deployed and the other one has COVID. So who takes care of the kids? You know, and you're not supposed to be engaging with people. So you want to minimize how many people you're being with if they do have COVID. So that's one of the things that you have to think about. Think outside the box. Who can come to your house to come help you? Do you need to fly them in from a different state? That was a great question, really great question. And do the things that you would normally do, you know, get out in the sunlight when you can to help dry up that sickness. Take all the meds that you're supposed to take, and keep washing your hands and not coughing on people.
Those are really good answers too, in addition to that question. So thank you everyone all around. The next one, I guess we specifically can kind of talk about USAA, but does renters insurance cover earthquakes and flood?
So yes, we cover earthquakes. Renters insurance covers earthquakes, flooding. Yes, just remember flooding is water that, no, not flooding. It will cover, there's water damage that can be covered, but, okay, let me get back to Sydney on that. I don't want to misspeak, okay? Sydney, I will get an answer on Monday. If you could, I'll email you by Monday. And if you want to just send it out to the person who's asking, okay?
Okay. So then in that case, the next one's going to be, and I guess this would also be a USAA question, but does car insurance cover a sound system or CD player? And so just to clarify, is that where you would also need the renter's insurance?
Yeah, so you'd have to call and find out. It gets into where you get aftermarket sound systems versus the what the car came with. But the best thing to do would be call and ask that specific question.
Okay. And then, so I guess a couple of the families were saying that we are giving out a lot of information, which just to reiterate, we will be following up with a YouTube video in a couple of days. But just where would you all recommend getting started if you have absolutely nothing? And like which items would you prioritize getting now?
I'll go ahead and answer. First off, on your phones, you can upload an app called Navy Family, My Navy Family, and it does have information on where to get kits. But also, Mike has 2 different uploads for you to have. One is for the kits and emergency preparedness. Right, Mike? I say questioningly. I forgot what I send. So he'll be uploading that. I would start simple. You have some old backpacks sitting there. Oh, there it is. Emergency kits. You have an old backpack that's not being used. Throw in some clothes that you're not using all the time. 3 days worth. And they have all that stuff in there. Some water. You can get those 5-gallon jugs and fill those up. You know, it costs $1.75 to fill up a whole jug. So that's pretty inexpensive. And then you can use it, you know, maybe once a month and then refill it. I know it gets kind of heavy. So that's my part of it. What else do you have, David?
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I said, no, you covered it. You're good.
Okay, so just a couple more questions. So just kind of like in a general emergency question. So families saying they've always heard to fill up a bathtub with water for emergency water. Is it still safe to fill it up after an emergency, just as far as safety?
Denise, what do you?
Yes, that is a great thing to do. I would, however, take and get the tablets that are out there. You can get them at the camp places that you take and throw in the water to make sure that it's chlorinized, or boil it. Make sure you have enough propane for your barbecue so that you can at least boil the water before you use it at that point in time. But the bathtub absolutely is 100% a great way to put water in there. Hopefully the water pipes are working so you can do that.
Okay, and so another question that we had is from an insurance standpoint. Say if you had like a fire and emergency where you just completely lost your home, how would you prove how much you had? Or is that something that you wouldn't really have to do?
So with the renter's policy, there's limits. With homeowner's policy, we insure up to a value, and so we pay out to that value. Okay, so if the home value, if you're insured for $500,000, that's what we're going to pay you out for. How you spend that, to rebuild and to replace your items. We have different products there's some individual items, jewelry and things like that you could pay a little bit extra on to get different replacement values for those. But we don't require evidence of what kind of furniture you have and things like that, if that's what you're asking.
I would piggyback off of that. One of the things that David did mention earlier was he takes pictures of different things. Take pictures of your computers. Take pictures of whatever it is you have in your house. It can be even a video, and then save it and upload it to the cloud, or save it and send it to your email so that you have it in your background. That's really, really helpful. We always encourage people to do that, especially when you're PCSing. So always keep that in mind. Yeah,
and bear in mind, I'm talking on answers like that. That is a USAA answer. I'm glad Denise said that. The members I've talked to that have encountered this, they've actually had photos and videos, and they would say, yeah, you guys didn't even require that from me. But other insurance providers absolutely might. So it is better to be safe than sorry regardless. So thanks for, going over that, Denise.
Thank you to both of you. We have just a couple more questions, and then we can wrap up this part of the session. So can USAA or other insurance companies cover personal goods that were damaged on a ship or work area? For example, if there are like fire and water damage to personal items?
Yeah, so we oftentimes we will. I know that military with renter's insurance on deployment, they get things lost and stolen, we'll cover that. So again, best thing to do is call before you deploy, or if anybody's here was stationed on the Bonhomme Richard, for example, and you have renter's policy, you should call us to see if and what will be covered. And really, whether you're with USA or not, if you have renter's insurance, call, see if and what is covered.
Okay, and so the final question, and this is just kind of a general emergency question. So how much deep water would be too much to drive through, especially in like a flood?
You don't drive through deep water. You don't drive through water. There is no, you just don't do it. You avoid it.
Yeah, don't do it. Grew up in San Diego, saw that. You'll always see as Mission Valley flood out, and you see people drive through it and they're thinking, yeah, I can do this. Don't do it. Water runs fast and will wipe you out. You deserve to live another day. So just don't do it. Just don't do it.
I grew up in Carlsbad. I was 17 years old. I was driving back to school after getting a pizza, and I decided to drive through water, and it flooded out my engine, and I sat on the side of the road. I couldn't get out of my car because I was afraid of water coming in, so I had to just sit there and eat my pizza until somebody came along to help me. Okay, so I'm glad I had the pizza, but that was just really stupid, and I knew better, but I was 17 years old, and come on, I know more than my parents, and in that case, I didn't. Yeah, just don't go through water.
Good to know. And again, we do want to thank both of our presenters and our families, just all around great questions and answers.
Lastly, we just want to thank all of you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this Zoom session. We had tons of great information tonight, thanks to our two speakers. We would love to thank all of you for attending. On behalf of everyone here at Lincoln, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy.